Hello, podcast listeners. This is your host with the most. We want to... Nope, I'm going to start this one over. Hello, podcast... What's up, podcast listen? If you're listening to this, this is my third attempt to try and make an intro. So, hello, podcast listeners. This is your host with the most, JJ. So far, so good. We're going to talk about an Alexander Payne movie that's coming out to theaters nationwide called The Holdovers. If you're listening to this in 2025, it's already streaming. You can watch it there. If you're listening to this the day it comes out, hi, Ryan. You're pretty good about that. You can actually go and see this in theaters before it leaves. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of JJ Meets World. And by the way, if you'd like to help support our podcast, visit JJMeetsWorld.com where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some killer swag at our merch shop, or click the link to Apple Podcast and give us a 5-star review.
1, 2, 3, 4. J.J. Gordon, sort of like that Indiana Jones, in that he's always sniffing out his next adventure. Yes, he is. He's always interviewing guests so he can have them on his show and they can talk about pop culture, arts, and leisure. J.J. has his flag unfurled and he likes his french fries curled, and he's fun and then he twirled as he goes to meet the world. He will march into the rain even if his ankle sprained. Take a peek inside his brain. This podcast is called J.J. Meets World.
Tucker, you went to a movie yesterday with your mom called The Holdovers.
Yeah.
It's directed by Alexander Payne, directed and I believe co-written by Alexander Payne, and then stars Paul Giamatti, and then a bunch of people that you sort of recognize but don't necessarily know what they're from.
Actually, there was only one other actor in the movie that I recognized at all.
Really?
It was the guy who plays Dollar Bill from Billions.
Really?
But yeah, I'm trying to think of...
The cook, she's been in a bunch of stuff.
You know, but at the same time, I have actually really been out of the movie watching game for a while, like on a regular basis. And the reason that I saw The Holdovers was actually my mom just texted me the other day and was like, "Hey, any chance you want to catch a matinee of The Holdovers on Friday?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's go have a movie night with my mom." You know. And
they've done a really great job marketing that to women and men in your mom's generation.
Oh, for sure. And
like they're the ones who are being sought out to see this movie.
So the movie takes place, I think, in 1970.
It does.
Okay, so I remember kind of clocking that at the beginning and going, okay, mom was in high school. And then when the movie was done, my first question to her was, how well did they capture the 70s? And she said, so this is my mom's review, they captured it perfectly. She said they got it down to the toothpaste, down to the brooch that she gets that Mary gets as a gift, to the cars, to the style of the houses, to everything. And I remember even thinking, you know, there's a lot of scenes where you're just seeing, you know, Boston in 1970, right? And so it's a lot of these really cool scenic shots where you see Paul Giamatti walking through them. So you know, okay, they shot this. So they had to, you know, block off that area and fill it with all these cars. And I just started to appreciate the actual design ethic that went into making the 1970s in front of us, which they also were able, you know, they give that sort of grainy film effect at the beginning, and the popping sound, so you get the sense of this is the timeline we're going into.
They did something that's very Quentin Tarantino-esque, which is they made a Miramax logo but made it in a 70s style, and it opens with, you know, it opens the way a movie in the 70s would open, like not with the more modern stuff, but with, like you said, the poppy. You know, they made it look like it was the grainy film.
And the opening credits lasted for like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
I mean, because the movie was telling you a story, but they just kept drawing out the opening credits. And I really liked that. I also really, really dug.
It's a very Alexander Payne thing.
Yeah. And I really, really dug opening with the boys choir. That set, like, obviously we didn't grow up in, what are they, in New Jersey, or where are they? Where's this boys' school at?
I mean, it must be like it's Massachusetts, Vermont,
somewhere,
like it's somewhere, New England,
within
even
driving
like
distance of Boston. But it made me recall just upper Midwestern winters in some new ways. We're going around.
Let's go back. We'll work our way to it.
We're talking texture right now. We haven't started talking story yet.
The premise of the film The Holdovers is Barton School for Boys is a boarding school for young men, and for some advantage. Like you find out immediately that this is not, you know, for bad kids. This is for kids who have means.
Yep.
and it's right before the Christmas holiday, and there is a handful of students who do not go home for Christmas. They're called the Holdovers, and one teacher is expected to stay there and essentially mind the children for the 2 weeks that winter break takes place.
Yeah.
It sets up Paul Giamatti's character is the least liked faculty member, both by the faculty and the students. He does have some relationships that are good, and it's not like he's a cruel guy. He's just clearly someone who wants to be by themselves. And so he gets more or less told that he's going to be the one looking over these kids, even though it's not his year for it. And they make a big deal about saying that several times, like, it's not my year. You're not the next one in the rotation. And then you start to meet the kids who are on the holdover list.
Yeah.
And each of them have a small story of why they're being left over. One of them is he was Korean, right? Mm-hmm. And so it just didn't make sense to fly him home and then fly him back. There was a
Mormon.
He
was too young.
Yeah. There's a Mormon. There are two very rich kids. Our main kid, you find out, is being left there by his mom and now stepfather. And he's very angry about being left over. And he's left over at the last minute. Like, his bags are literally packed, and then he gets a phone call.
It's a dick move by his mom. His mom is completely in the wrong.
The other staff that they have at the school, and we're talking about, it is a college campus size school, and it's been around for 100 years. And so it's a lot of old wood and old buildings. It's gorgeous.
Dead Poets Society.
I got that vibe the whole time, right?
Yeah, but not as polished. Right?
Right.
I'm not sure what era Dead Poets is in, if that's the 50s or 60s or 80s. I don't actually know what generation that one is, but this one feels more not realistic, I guess, or more hyper real.
Right.
Yeah. Alexander Payne really paints that picture of the place that they are is one of the main characters in the movie.
Bingo, right? And so the rest of the movie is what takes place over these 2 weeks, and it leads up to Christmas. They clearly want this to be a Christmas movie, a movie you watch at Christmas, but it also bleeds over into the new year, right? And so it's the snippet of time and the things that go on at this place. And like a good thing to note is it's not like they've got the run of the whole school. They can get around if they can steal Paul Giamatti's keys, but they turn off the heat to all these buildings, so they're staying in the infirmary. Like, they're having to sleep in the infirmary.
It builds character, right?
It does.
To be a Barton man.
I love Alexander Payne's dialogue. Everything from the movie Election to About Schmidt, Nebraska is friggin' amazing. I think Alexander Payne nails it when it comes to dialogue, and he has some stuff that I've started quoting after this.
Very quotable movie. So I guess from here on out, we're going to say spoiler alert.
Let's
spoiler alert.
I'm going to keep it as like so you can enjoy it, but like Paul Giamatti's character does seem to have this wit and wisdom to him. So okay,
I wanted to look up the word just to make sure I was using it correctly, but Paul Giamatti has sort of cornered the market in irascible characters.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you
like
describe
Robert Duvall had it before him.
If you describe a character as irascible, then it's like, well, Paul Giamatti would be amazing. And amongst a number of other words, that sort of angry loner, pissing on the world, really down on himself and pessimistic. He has that nailed.
He has trouble accepting a plate of cookies in one of the opening scenes.
Every scene with him in a pipe, I loved it.
Oh,
watching him light up in a movie theater and just hit it really, really hard. Those moments.
Okay, so this movie, I would say is what would you say, a dramedy? It's a drama and a comedy.
Oh, I'd say it's a dramedy. Yeah,
it reminds me of like the movie Doubt, right? So, or like even the play of like. There are very humorous moments that drive it from place to place, but like this is a character study to like the nth degree in it. And Paul Giamatti's character. So the other people who are left at the school at the same time is there's one woman who's in charge of the kitchen. She's like the kitchen manager, and you find out that her son had gone to Barton and had been killed in Vietnam, and so this is the first Christmas she spent without her son, who clearly was a major part of her life.
And to add to it, the a part of the tragedy of it is that she got the job there, so he could go there.
Right.
So he was a kid who didn't have means, who then had to and was then forced to go and serve in Vietnam, which
So
these
get the
kids
GI
weren't.
Bill, yeah.
These kids weren't, and then lost his life.
And isn't that an interesting aspect of this? Of like, you see them and they've got the memorial like at the last, because it's a Christian school, because at one point they go to
Catholic,
is a Catholic,
Yep.
So they have to go to like a mass before they leave, and that is the only remembrance. Is this particular like flag and photo, and it made me think, well, yeah, because these are all kids of privilege who are probably not serving.
Yep. No. Yeah. And their empathy is fake. It's mostly fake. It really truly is. So
there's also a custodian, but it's clear that he doesn't live on campus like the other ones do. Like he must just show up. And there's a shoveling scene with him in the beginning that I felt it. Like I could feel it in my back, how he was using this grain shovel, and like it's an endless series of paths.
I want to look at that actor's name, because he kills it with the slow burn with the mop and the bucket. And he brings it over to the table. He says, "Oh, someone vomited in the gym."
In the gym.
I just love that slow burn in. That was so good.
Alexander Payne does a great job with a small main cast, but having numerous people surround them.
Yeah.
So there are scenes where they go to like a local pub to have cheeseburgers. They, like you said, they spend time in Boston. There's even at the beginning, there's a lot of kids like in the school as they get whittled down to who the holdovers are. And so there's this interesting point where when I was watching the movie, I was finally like, I just don't like the main kid. I just don't care. I don't care for him as an actor. I understand that he's like, if I want to seem emotional, I'm going to talk like this. And I was just like, this is just, Alexander Payne does such a good job choosing young actors. You can see that in the movie Election. It is perfect. That I'm really surprised that this guy ended up being his choice.
Yeah. The actor's name was Naheem Garcia.
And clearly like, because it changes the relationship. The minute that everyone else leaves, the relationship has changed, even though Paul Giamatti says we are going to observe the regular school schedule while you're here. So could you imagine your Christmas break and you've got to go and like you've got 2 hours in the library working on projects?
Yeah, it is kind of it's almost a pump fake early on, where you think you're about to watch like a Breakfast Club of a band of misfit kids who somehow find a connection.
Right.
When you find out, actually most of these kids are actually not in the movie. They're only here as part of the setup to sort of deepen the humiliation of our lead character as he is, left behind and then left behind again, and he's sort of being left behind over and over and over again. Your comment about is it a dramedy, is it a comedy, is it a drama, really has me kind of thinking that Alexander Payne's tone that he seems to use, I would call it's almost like an absurdist drama. Sometimes, right? It's a drama with moments of like, suddenly Sideways has like full frontal male nudity of a guy running out of a house to come and attack them. Paul Giamatti in this movie referring to someone as being penis cancer in human form.
I loved that line.
Such a
I've
great
used it
line.
like 6 times since I've seen them.
I think the other line that it's really a dialogue that I love is, does your mom have lupus? I don't know. Probably. Is a really great response. You have to kind of see it to get it, but I just like that. I don't know, probably.
We have already started talking about like the setting. So something I thought about when I'm watching this movie, right? It's difficult if you have a movie that's set in the 70s. It's not like everything can be from 1973. Right. And so one of the things I thought was interesting is like Paul Giamatti's car that he has is a car that's clearly from like 15 years earlier and is just shitty, right? But you have to think about that when you make a movie. Like, okay, the movie's set in 1970. Well, you've got stuff that's still from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. Primarily probably more like stuff from the 60s as it leads up. I also think that Alexander Payne understands what school is, right? Like, this becomes their prison. And none of them get to rule inside of this prison. I also think Paul Giamatti's character, they did an excellent job with his costume pieces, because he looks like a guy who has maybe 3 things in his closet, and he just goes through those 3 things.
Fantastic art direction. They give you close-ups of, your primary characters at one point are all getting ready to go to a Christmas party, and you get, you see what Giamatti's sink looks like. You can and you see his used bottle of hemorrhoid cream and all these other things that they tell you. And when you do, it's a lot of people don't think about this, but in movies, anytime you're seeing any of that kind of stuff, that someone designed that. An artist came in and designed the look and feel of everything in that, because it's telling a story. And sometimes you can go like in a Wes Anderson style that's very specific. You're going for like a kid's picture book look or a toy box look. And in this one, they're going for ultra realism. And I think they really did a good job. And I would be fascinated to find out more of how that process worked out, because it felt really, really good. Alexander Payne also really adopts a style of letting a scene breathe and making the camera be somewhat unobtrusive in a lot of it, which is sort of the opposite of David Fincher, will kind of take you into the bowels of something. And so that opening scene that I mentioned with the boys choir, it's one shot, and I think they have an actual voice coach coaching them. That might be an actual boys choir.
And he did that in Election, where they're like, we're going to shoot in this school and we're going to use actual students from the school to populate, like most of these roles. And because like the boys choir doesn't sound great. But it sounds good.
Like a boys choir. It sounds like a high school boys choir.
It does, exactly, right?
And it brings you back. It brings you back to go into any denomination church and hearing that. And I really appreciated that. And I appreciate the ability to capture that feeling of local texture that they were able to get by making their extras not look like extras. They did a fantastic job with that. I think the only thing that really ever pulled me out of the movie, and I'd have to go back and watch it again to really find specific examples, in a lot of dialogue scenes in that sort of second act to third act bridge where they're really opening up to each other, I don't know, a lot of it just felt like stock dialogue to me. Like, I've seen this scene before.
Yeah.
This character is just telling me how they feel. And I'm not saying that's necessarily bad. I think you can almost say that's a genre choice. But I think there were moments like that I felt were not up to the level of other moments in the movie. That being said, it was a breath of fresh air to watch a movie that was breathing, right? That wasn't snappy shots, a lot of really slow dissolves in the same scene. That just tells you to, hey, rest your brain while you're watching this. We're taking a different pace with it.
I should also point out at this point, like, I did not think that this was a great movie. I thought that this is perfectly serviceable.
It was fine. It was good. I mean, clearly I enjoyed it.
It's lower on my list of Alexander Payne movies, like if I'm going to watch. I don't know if there's a rewatch of this in my future. Like, maybe if it's on in the background, I'll catch a little bit of it. And it's not that they're bad performances. It's not that it's a bad plot or anything like that. But this is definitely a movie that once you see it once, I don't think that you're going to... You might catch some things that were being set up, but you didn't necessarily see. But like, there's not a huge rewatch value to me in the Holdovers. That being said, I think that you should probably see it. Like, see it at least once, because it's going to bring your mom had a different viewing of it than you and I would, because she when she looks at the bar that's decorated like half-assedly for Christmas, and she's like, "Oh my God, I remember those bubbler lights that were popular. This was the it thing for Christmas lights for a time, right?" The soundtrack also, I think he does Alexander Payne always does a wonderful job with the soundtrack. In fact, I think Rolf Kent is the guy who he teams up with the most. And in Sideways made this little jazz trio, and that's what permeates the entire movie and gives you this sense of you're moving along, and there's a highway theme, and then there's the theme when they're with the girls and these types of things. In this, you get a mixture of Christmas music, but an old school style of Christmas music, and these small little pieces of music narration that kind of comes into it. And I thought that he made some really good choices when it came to that, because it really did make me feel, I was like, yeah, the boredom. Like, there's no scene where they, take the PA speaker and like play the Rolling Stones and rock out.
Yeah. To add to the reasons why I found it a refreshing viewing is that even though, as a total movie, sometimes I feel bad for movies that all movies end up getting compared to other movies, right? And so, the filmmaker, I'm sure, would love to go, can my movie ever just exist on its own? And I think it can, especially for the people who've made it, and for the people who it strikes a specific chord with. But I watch it and I get the sense that I'm getting, Payne's perspective, his artist's view and feel of it. So even when there are moments where I might be picking it apart, like, oh, this is an interesting choice where he's going to talk to Mary in the kitchen and the camera's like almost a fisheye lens and down at this one weird angle that you never really see ever again. And the sense that I get is more or less that day, Alexander Payne was like, I don't know, I feel this one. And I dig that. I actually really dig that. I'm like, you know what? I'd rather get this right now. I'd rather get the film that you want me to see versus the one that I go, oh, I would have made. I can still make those comments and choices, but I would rather take a movie that I might call a B- or C+ that comes from the artist's soul than a B+ or A- movie that comes from Disney.
Well, it's the matter of like, why do you even have test screenings in some ways, right? Like, if you're going to go and just re-chop the movie together, be like, well, we need to salvage this and add more jokes and do, blank, 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 blank.
Do you think they shot this on film?
I don't think so. I think that is such a cumbersome thing these days that I think it's tough for them. That's one of the reasons why, like, Nebraska is in the black and white, the look that it is that he wanted to get it as close to like looking more like film as possible.
Technicals, but I'm gonna I think you're more than likely right. But I just also think
I think making a movie on film these days takes a studio that says, well, we're gonna get our investment back on this.
No, yeah, you're right. It was shot digitally.
But
they printed a 35 millimeter print for it.
That's good. That's good. So. And, because it is fun to watch those. Now, that being said, the first time I saw a digital projection was for Sweeney Todd, because they had filmed it in digital. They weren't going to transfer it over like onto 35 millimeter. They were only going to have digital projection. So I drove up to Grand Forks to see it, and watching the credits at that time, they rolled so smoothly. And I'm like, don't like this. Don't like it. Doesn't feel right. It feels like I'm watching something on Movie Maker. Like, it doesn't feel right. There should be, like not a jump, but the scroll itself should feel differently. Snow. Snow is a hard thing to do in movies, and I think is done wrong 95% of the time. You see someone who's out supposed to be in the bitter cold and snowing, but you don't see any of their breath, coming out.
I think for understandable reasons, it fucking sucks to shoot the snow.
It does. It does.
Sucks so hard.
They clearly shot like this in the
on location in that season. Perfect.
And like the snow, I commend, because the problem with snow is every single time you shoot a scene, if it has someone like walking across like a field towards you, you got to go back then and like essentially rake it so that you don't see the footprints anymore. Yeah. I was astounded at how good the snow and the winter pieces looked in this movie. And it looked cold.
And also the sky. The sky was just gray.
Yeah.
It was just this gray, flat. Like, they captured the flatness of winter, like the lack of contrast that we see when it's just muddy grays, and it's not like a Christmas card. You really need to be at night with a gentle snowfall to have pretty winter. You really, really do.
I heard a really interesting thing about, like when you walk out and it's snowing and everything seems so quiet, like there's a quietness to it. So when snow falls, it traps air between snowflakes, small amounts of air. And sound travels like in waves and makes vibrations. But the air that's trapped between these snowflakes, and of course it gets piled up, doesn't allow the vibrations to take place. And so everything is muted, like having a mute on a trumpet, right?
That makes perfect sense.
And they got that in elements of this. There was one piece. So again, spoiler territory on this. It starts off with 5 young men, right?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
There's 3 older boys and then 2 younger boys.
Yep.
So it starts out with 5 young men, and one of them ends up getting like his dad sends a helicopter for him, and he's like, "Oh, come skiing with us anyway. Come on out." And the only kid who can't go because he can't get parental permission is our main character, this kid who had been dumped there at the last minute. There is a scene that takes place beforehand where the 5 of them are outside because Paul Giamatti insists that they go outside and they get fresh air and like physical activity, even though he's a paunchy guy himself. He is so in a place of the school like proctor that you've seen in many, many movies before. Like, so he fits the bill with that, but he's out there telling them that while he's smoking his pipe, right?
Yeah.
And one of the young boys gets in trouble for tattling on another young boy, and a guy steals his mitten and throws it into a river. And then the kid goes and then throws his other mitten into the river. And that scene has been the one I have thought about probably the most since this. And there's nothing groundbreaking about it. It doesn't play later into the movie, but it makes me really think about like, okay, so when one thing is gone and now it's unbalanced, would you rather have one mitten or just no mittens? Right? It's a weird choice. It also makes me hate that other character. Like, I hated that guy.
Yeah, and that guy was a dick. And I'm sure if there were more scenes with him, we would probably see we get some sense of where that comes from a little bit. I mean, these guys, even when you are privileged, when you get abandoned, you can come from a deeply toxic place. And the movie deals so much with people who don't have that privilege and how their lives are upended by those who do. Giamatti's character could have gone on one way, could have gone on one path, but because he didn't have a fancy last name, he was an easy scapegoat. Mary, being a black woman, working class in the 70s at an almost all white boys, prep school, basically. I mean, she's treated like shit, and she
has to put up with the things that, at one point she goes, I hear what they say.
She can hear every piece of abuse that they throw her way. And, is now trapped basically in a job that she started to try to get her son into, who was then killed in duty. So, she's with that. And then we see someone who has privilege in the way of maybe resources and reach, but he has no unconditional love. He doesn't have a family. His mother, who I'm sure has had her own fucking crazy things happen to her, has decided that the perfect time for me to go on a honeymoon with my wealthy husband is during the Christmas time when my son is on break versus when he's at school and actually is going to school and has to be there.
Right.
And so, they're all lacking in some way, and they're all acting out in their own way too. And it's really beautiful and painful at the same time. And I think that I'm seeing, relationships that I would have loved to have seen, characters I would have loved to have seen get explored in even deeper context. I would have loved to have spent more time with Mary when she's with her sister, and I would have loved to spend more time with the other boys before they go off on the helicopter ride, because it felt like there were things there to explore. So I don't know, maybe Payne creates a Payniverse of his movies. I wanted to bring up the fact that you and I actually got to be in attendance at part of the 48-hour film competition at a presentation that Alexander Payne gave, and then you attended a more personal, like in-person talk where he really kind of let his guard down and talked about some of the shit going on, or the things he was seeing in Hollywood that he didn't like. Do you remember any of the kind of the nuggets that he dropped that day?
Yeah, one of the things was you cannot become so ingrained and married to something that you want to do and you want to make, because you get to make something, but there are thousands of people, including the people who put up the money for it, who are there, and what you intend to make and what you end up with is never the same. And so clearly he had just been through the ringer on some project, and
this would have been 2006, I think.
Yeah.
2007?
No, it was
2008?
before that. I think it was before that, wasn't it? I
thought we made Cinderella in 06.
Okay.
Because I thought we made Milk Babies in 06.
Was that 06?
So maybe it was 06, 07.
Okay.
I think is more the
Really?
timeline. I think so.
Wow. It's amazing how time flies.
Yeah.
So, which again is almost 20 years ago at this point.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, 20 years ago.
Alexander Payne is interesting because one of the things he does is so that he can make the movie that he wants to make, is because his movies are never boffo, commercial successes.
No.
None of them are making $300 million, right?
He was,
But
he
they're
was someone who
doing
was
well.
thriving when that home DVD market was still a big
God.
thing where you could get financing for movies like that.
And I also think he's the perfect candidate for something like HBO knows that they're going to buy a year-long lease on one of his movies, right? Because Sideways still gets watched today. Election gets watched. One of his first movies was a movie called Citizen Ruth.
Yep.
And he actually has a tie to Fargo, North Dakota, because there was a case in Fargo that became the inspiration for the movie Citizen Ruth. Citizen Ruth, starring Laura Linney, I believe, or Laura Dern. No, Laura Linney. It was Laura Linney. Is about a woman who gets pregnant, and then she is courted by both pro-life and pro-choice groups to get an abortion or not get an abortion.
Who did you say it was?
Laura Linney?
Laura Dern.
It was Laura Dern. Darn it, it was one of the Lauras. And during...
Would you say the better? I'd say the better Laura.
Dern?
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I can't stand Laura Linney in anything.
I worship at the altar of Laura Dern.
Yeah. Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. In fact, just the other day I was saying, I think any Laura Linney role would be better with Laura Dern in it.
Yeah, and Laura Dern was the costume of Jill for Halloween from Jurassic Park, or was that Amy?
That was Amy.
That was Amy.
In fact, you want to hear something?
I get them confused sometimes.
because I know Jill doesn't listen to this podcast. So
Doesn't she have a coworker who does?
yeah, she does, but maybe they won't. So 2 weeks before Halloween, Jill approached me and she's like, "Listen, I've got a great idea for a couple's costume for us."
Oh no!
And it was Dr. Grant and Dr. Sattler from Jurassic Park, and I was like, "The thing is I'm already doing that with Amy."
The moment you said so, Jill came to me with an idea. I knew the story.
Right? And the thing is Jill never comes to me, and so I felt real bad about that. Jill ended up she had a great idea for a costume this year, and she actually did the same thing as a woman I follow. If you ever saw the movie School of Rock, she's the bassist in the band, but that woman grew up to be quite the comedian, and she goes by the name Rivka Riaz right now. And I saw her in a group in Chicago called the Cupid Players, and they do musical comedy. And she sang a song called "The Friend Zone" that really it was awesome. And so I followed her on Instagram. So she and Jill did the same outfit, which is Pearl from the movie Pearl. Have you watched Pearl or X?
No.
How do you feel about scary movies?
Oh, I mean, jump scare movies where the whole thing is to keep getting you like that. They can be fun. I think they're fun with a girlfriend sitting next to you. I think that's when they're fun.
And I assume you don't like the torture porn stuff like Saw.
I'm not interested in it. Like, my genre of horror is much more, I think you could categorize it as dark fantasy. Like the Universal Hollywood monsters. And
are you
like
familiar with what Ty West has done with X and Pearl?
No.
Okay, so these movies came out 2 years ago, I think. So X is a movie about a group of guys and men and women from Dallas who rent a bunkhouse at this old farmstead in rural Texas because they're going to shoot a porn.
Okay.
But they're like, this is the next big thing. We're gonna make it. It's gonna be huge. And the old man that they rent this from is like, don't come scratching around my door. Leave my wife alone.
I wouldn't go up that road.
Right. And it's got this weird, creepy vibe to it. I highly recommend it. it was weird because when I went out, I'm like, by the premise of this movie is like they're making a porno, but there's a psychological aspect to it. Like it's real good. I liked it a lot. And what he did was while they were making this movie, he secretly shot a prequel to it at the same time using Mia Goth is the main character. She plays Maxine in X, and then she plays Pearl in the movie Pearl. And what's interesting is Pearl is not necessarily a horror movie. Pearl is this weird. It's set during the 1918 Spanish flu. And so during the time of COVID, it really felt like visceral to us, right? About like wearing masks and going into town to get medicine and don't talk to anybody while you're there. And her parents are German immigrants. And so they treat her really poorly. And she's got all the stuff she's got to do. And her husband is off fighting in World War I. But it's an allusion to the Wizard of Oz. And so when you watch it, it's done in like the same color palette and things like that. I mean, I'm telling you, I loved X. I loved Pearl. And they're making another one right now called Maxine, Maxxxxine, that follows her character from X going forward.
Interesting.
I can't wait. It's some of the most just like purely fun and inventive storytelling I've seen in a very long time. So I digress. I highly recommend it.
Okay.
In fact, I forced some guests at our house. Shout out to Rachel who's watching this to listening to this to watch it while she was there, and like we get her to watch X, and like she was like, "Are we watching Pearl tomorrow night?" And I'm like, "Yes, let's watch Pearl." So Jill went as Pearl for Halloween. That's what I'm getting at here. It's a long story to come back to this.
The Holdovers.
The Holdovers. Well, in Alexander Payne's career, just in general, we talked about he's got this allusion to Fargo. And so it was great because after it was like this one-on-one where only 25 people were allowed to like listen to him pontificate for 90 minutes. Mm-hmm. One of the things he said is like, he goes, one thing that you have to do in Hollywood to make ends meet is script punch-ups. And he had just been nominated for an Academy Award. And usually whoever does punch-ups doesn't get script. Like,
right.
You don't get a screenplay or story by, but they included him on I Now Pronounce You Chuck and Larry.
Oh, that's
because
right.
he had done punch-up, and he was real mad about that. He was real mad that they are using his name to try and sell this movie. But afterwards I got to go up and I'm like, hello, like I'm JJ Gordon. I'm from Fargo. I know Lisa Farnham. And he's like, Lisa's great. And so I got a little one-on-one time with him, which was really, really nice. And he was very kind and was, clearly he knew his job there was to talk to people who are interested in filmmaking. Yeah. It's not like he was like, give me your business card and like, let's collaborate on something. But he was the keynote that they.
That's what everyone else was trying to say.
Right.
By the way, I want to say, I just now learned how to fucking pour with this thing.
Yeah, I know. You've got this coffee jug.
This is what I've been using for a solid year now, and I've always complained that it pours so bad because when you bring it back, it just drips down the side like that. No, you twist the damn thing.
Twist it.
God, I'm dumb. Well,
it's all right. You learn something new every day.
I did learn something new every day. That frustration is gone now, and now I've learned something new, and now I like the smug even, or this carafe, or whatever you call it.
I mean, it would be great to like not watch you struggle with it anymore, because at one point you just think like, I guess you're not teaching an old dog new tricks. Huh?
And this handle's gonna snap off at some point. Absolutely. I want
to get you one of the old like banquet style ones that like it's got the swervy design to it, and like I'm like, why don't you just walk around with that?
So I have a 70 ounce that I just recently got, but it doesn't retain heat nearly as well as this one. This one can keep hot all day long. I remember you saying something about Payne saying something about Spielberg. Like, he doesn't actually direct his movies anymore. Yeah. What was that?
So the idea behind it was there are so many people who insulate someone like Steven Spielberg that he's not actually really directing his movies anymore. And he said the pace at which he releases movies, you can tell like he's not making all the choices that a director would on a lower budget film or someone who's doing something that's so deep and like important to them. Example, if Steven Spielberg releases a movie every single year for 5 years, most pre-production on movies is taking several years of like dedicated work on that. But he's got so many irons in the fire that what's he doing? Well, that's why he surrounds himself with producers that he knows and trusts, so that he doesn't have to look at like dailies from the second unit. They can look at those things and approve it. And after he started talking about sometimes you just get too big for your britches, right? I started noticing it with his movies, where it's like
Payne's movies.
No, with Spielberg's movies, and they're very entertaining and they're great, but they are clearly made by a committee of people.
They feel like a corporation definitely had a hand in making this, even though that's essentially been true on some level.
Yeah,
since the beginning of movie making. But yeah, I think another person I would say is I thought Tim Burton lost his voice when he just got too much money to make stuff.
Definitely.
Because it's like it took the aesthetic of Tim Burton and turned it into a theme park.
Yep.
And that's what it feels like. It feels like a Disney, like a dark Disney, which makes sense since he was a Disney animator and all this other stuff. But I look at Pee-wee's Big Adventure is a phenomenal movie, and then I compare like his Willy Wonka or his other stuff that he's attached to, and I just go, it doesn't have the heart to it. It felt like this guy had no limits on what he could do, and so he just kept ordering anything that he wanted.
Yeah, I think CGI was the worst thing to happen to Tim Burton, because
that's a really good call. Yes.
Yeah, because all of a sudden he had this new tool in his toolbox.
Part of his aesthetic was in that physical cheapness, the look of Beetlejuice. There's
a movie in there. Oh, it was Jurassic Park, right? So in Jurassic Park, Malcolm talks about how like it's like you this isn't something you earned, right? Like this is something that you just you created and you slapped it, a product label on, you put in a box. It's not something that you had to like endure to get this, even though they built the technology for this gene splicing, right? I feel like that's the same thing with CGI and a lot of directors. Now that being said, let's go back to Holdovers. I think that they CGI'd Paul Giamatti's lazy eye.
Oh, I thought he actually had a lazy eye.
I don't know if he does. I've seen him in so many other movies where he doesn't have a lazy eye.
Oh.
And this one was like pretty aggressive at points.
Yeah. Unless he usually has a lazy eye but has it corrected or is able to do something.
Like when Jim Carrey took off the cap on his tooth for when he played Lloyd Christmas.
Yeah, it could be something like that. I wanted to say, to almost step back from Holdovers suddenly again, is that Jurassic Park, my opinion, peak Spielberg.
Oh, I think without a doubt.
Peak Spielberg. I'd say E.T. is right up there, but which is why I collect, one of the many reasons why I collect both, multiple copies. But Jurassic Park, to this day, that's in my top 5 movies of all time. That is peak Steven Spielberg as a filmmaker, where you still feel like someone is actually directing this thing.
So an interesting fact about Jurassic Park, Jurassic Park just put out this book that's sort of like a making of Jurassic Park that's amazing, that includes production stills and then like pieces of paper and stuff like that. And Steven Spielberg talks about in it that every filmmaker from his era was obsessed with one movie that was the ultimate like creature feature for them growing up, and it was King Kong. And no one thought they could ever make a movie that would rival King Kong as a creature feature. And yet he does with Jurassic Park. Jurassic Park is the modern version of a giant monster movie that seems plausible, right? Like it's not like, like Godzilla to some extent like has that same like feeling, but not everyone gets to make a Godzilla movie.
I think you're really you're putting a spotlight on something that I've been kind of struggling with in my sorting my tapes into genres on my shelf is, you've got science fiction, then really creature feature, and that creature feature can be dinosaurs, it can be kaiju, which is their own thing, or it can be the Blob or Gremlins or them, they live, things like that. And I've struggled with where should these things go? Even like the Power Rangers is sort of part kaiju film, but part superhero. And so I go, where does this go? And so you're right. At one point, I grouped my Jurassic Park collection in with my kaiju, and like basically dinosaurs, giant monsters, giant robots. I was like, they all kind of go together in one thing. So like Transformers was in there for a period of time, but then I was like, there's too much here that's Saturday morning superhero serial cartoon, and you have to take it out of there. So I think there is a creature feature speciality that where that could go in.
Oh, I agree
King Kong.
wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg, I think, does the best when he picks a subject matter that isn't like in the more modern one. Like one of my favorite Steven Spielberg movies of all time, like top 3, is The Terminal, which is based on a true story.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Great movie. I've watched that a lot.
I'll tell you a couple things that make The Terminal a perfect movie. Number 1, Tom Hanks's performance in it is amazing. It is amazing because you feel at first you're like, I don't want anything to do with this guy, right? He doesn't speak English. He doesn't know our customs.
I loved him from the first moment.
Oh, I don't.
I loved him immediately.
I was like, nope, and I grow to love him like during this movie. In the same way that like the staff at the airport grows to like love him and appreciate him, right? The score to that movie is without a doubt amazing. I have a Spotify playlist called Writing, and it's essentially like when I'm writing a blog or I'm putting something together. I'm still working on my book. They're instrumental pieces, right? And a couple of them are from movies, and one of them it's called The Tale of Victor, No. Hold on, I'm gonna find it. What the heck is his name? Savorsky. Oh my gosh! Why? And this is from 2004, mind you.
Okay.
Victor Navorsky, that's what it is. Victor Navorsky. It's The Tale of Victor Navorsky is the name of the track, and it's a John Williams track, and it's perfect. I also really appreciate this. They built this entire terminal
they'd have
on a soundstage so that they could have full access to all these pieces. But it looks and
good.
feels like you are in an airline like area.
The terminal always makes me hungry for Burger King.
Yeah, and the product placement, that's another thing too, is like this is one of the best movies for product placement.
Yeah.
Like I can tell, okay, so there's the Discovery Store. There is the Brooks Brothers, the suit place. There's the Folders, the guidebook. There's Burger King. What's another one that's in there that you see immediately? There's just like all, because you have all the shops, but then you have all the things he interacts with, right? And it's perfect.
Do we have a Burger King anymore?
Yes, we do.
Where do we have a Burger
on
King?
52nd Avenue.
That's the only one we have? What about the one that's by the interstate?
There's another one on Veterans. Not anymore.
Not anymore?
Yeah.
Jesus.
You want to go get a Burger King after this?
Not really.
You want a double patty, flame grilled Whopper?
In general, fast food has been bad for me.
I can't eat it anymore. I can't.
Well, I can eat it, but it's really expensive and low quality, and it's wrong half the time. And I find that when I get home, and I'm like, you know what? Really, in all honesty, I should be making food for myself again for a number of reasons. The cost, and also I have control over the end product, so I'm not worrying about. Gosh, I sure hope. They read the order at Subway that I punched in on this touch machine correctly again, which they almost never do.
You know what we should do is someday we should do a podcast where we have to record 2 separate tracks at the same time, and it'll be me. We'll both start off in my kitchen, and I will have like a frozen hamburger patty and see who can successfully bring home 2 hamburgers the fastest. And we won't even talk about quality, because I truly believe.
I think I already know the answer.
From a frozen patty, I'm pretty sure I could get it cooked and served by the time you would get back with cheeseburgers. From
100%. I mean, I think you would actually need to let me have a head start to even make it fair. I just think it would take, we'd probably, if we're using your house, we're probably using the McDonald's in South University. It's got to be the closest one.
Which you can wait an aggressively long time there.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we'd have to pick the time of day too, because we know for sure the driver loses if it's lunch hour or dinner hour.
Can I take a really hard left in this podcast?
Always. Your name's in the title.
I bought an unlimited wash package from one of the millions of car washes that exist in Fargo now.
How much did that cost?
It's $10 a month for the first 6 months, and then it jumps up to $20.
How often do you wash your car?
I thought, I was like, if I wash it once a month, I'm getting my money's worth. I'm going 3 times a week.
Jesus.
My car, I can't, after this, I'm going to go out and wash it again. And it is awesome. And I can't even tell you how great it is just to always have this clean car.
Sure.
There was a day where I parked outside and it snowed and I was like, oh, I got to get all the snow off. No, I'm just going to go over to the car wash because I have unlimited washes. And if they don't get all the ice on the first time, I'll just drive through it again.
That's actually not a bad call. That's actually a great call.
And then they've got free... they've got the free vacuums, right? And I didn't think that was going to be a big deal, but it is. They also have like a little air gun, so like I can like. I'm telling you, I am shocked that we have as many car washes in Fargo as we do.
Well, that land is valuable, right? That's why they're there.
But I really love this, and so I picked the one that they had opened on South University Drive. It's a Silver Star brand. It looks just like Tommy's, but it's Silver Star. And I thought, well, this is close to my house, so I'll go with this one. Then they opened one that was right near my work, right where Country Greenery used to be. Mm-hmm. And then they opened up another one like in North Fargo. So when I go up to North High to teach improv, like I can do, it's just so convenient. And I found myself leaving for work a little bit early so I can wash my car before I go to work. And my car is the cleanest it's ever been because I can just use those vacuums and vacuum it out. And if I stay on top of it, you and I both have had the experience of pretty much living out of our cars, and they just get to be like collection sites, right?
Yeah. You are just all over the thing.
Bingo, right? And so I have found that I feel better having a car that's consistently like, and it doesn't have to be pristine, but
that makes sense.
Knowing that there is not a banana peel that's been sitting on the passenger side like area for 2 weeks is great.
I could definitely see the benefit, just the psychological benefit of stepping into a car that doesn't look like you've been living in it.
Right.
Or you've been using it forever.
And someone told me that, and I wasn't a mechanic, so you take this with a grain of salt, but during the winter...
Even if it was a mechanic, you might want to take it.
Yeah, sure. Good call. During the winter, you end up getting a lot of buildup of snow and ice on your tires, right? Like in the tire wells and underneath. And so you actually lose some control of your car as well as your mileage goes down. And so getting one of these washes like on a regular basis will save you over the course of the life of your car. And so I also feel like my car drives better after I get a car wash. Yeah. Same with an oil change or when I fill up the gas, it just drives better.
It makes me think of Ant-Man and the Wasp. They talk about, you don't need to get the undercarriage wash out here. We don't have the same kind of buildup they have in the upper Midwest. Snow and salt. And I was like, that's true. They're right.
Did you guys hear that? They're talking to us.
That's like when we get excited about hearing Fargo get mentioned in a show. Like I remember watching, I think it was Salute Your Shorts. And he's in love with the mail lady.
And she's memorized all the zip codes.
But she said one that wasn't 58102. And I remember thinking, that's not right. But Fargo, North Dakota. I think he yells Fargo, North Dakota, and she yells out a zip.
I think she says like 58104.
Okay.
And so I was why did you pick south of 32nd Avenue, you bastards? Like, screw you.
That's us. Mm-hmm. That's us.
I mean, it's great.
I still feel excited when that happens. And the movie Fargo does nothing for me.
I was just watching The Naked Gun 2.5, and
yes,
there's a sequence. There's an amazing sequence that starts off in the crime lab, and they're trying to identify this guy from a bombing. And they said, "Well, what did you do?" He's like, "Well, in the woods we found a footprint, and so we made a plaster cast. We also found this. It's a dinosaur print, like this. And then we dug down underneath the footprint, and after about 15 feet, we found this beam that we believed to be a part of Noah's Ark." And they're going on. He's like, "We're going to take these microfibers and we're going to send them off for analysis, but it might take a couple of weeks." And he goes, "Oh, well, we don't have that much time." He goes, "Oh, well, we also found his wallet, but we haven't had time to look at it yet." And so they open it up and they find out that the Victor Savage, the villain, was a heavyweight boxer. And they're like, "Oh, yeah." And they're like, "He boxed under the name Kid Minneapolis. He was from Chicago." "No, Detroit." And they go back and forth. And he's like, "Yeah." And then they also like... he's like, and then he lost killed in the ring to Dakota. I can't remember if it was North or South. North. South Dakota was his brother. And even at that, like, I was sitting and I go, oh, North Dakota.
Yeah.
They mentioned our state.
Is it the one and only genuine originally family band that involves the Dakota election? Okay. So that's where it's just Dakota territory.
Yeah.
That hasn't been divided up yet. Is it Grover Cleveland is
It
running
is,
for president?
yeah.
Gosh, I wonder.
That's a great movie, by the way.
That is. I haven't seen that since I was a kid. That would be one of the ones that my mom would rent for us on a Friday night because she knew it was safe and sanitary for us to watch. I wonder how long a supercut of mentions of Fargo, North Dakota in movies and TV would be.
I mean, probably not as long as you'd think.
Yeah,
but longer.
characters saying Fargo or Fargo, North Dakota, making mention of Fargo, North Dakota.
Outside of the television show Fargo, right?
Outside of that, you'd have
Which,
to.
by the way, brand new season of the show Fargo coming out on November 21st. I'm very excited because John Hamm is in it, and then Juno Temple's in it, and Dave Foley. And so I was like, ooh, these are all people I like. Can't wait for it.
I haven't watched that show at all yet. Oh.
Yeah, you haven't watched it at all?
Nope.
Oh, sir.
There's so many things I have not watched. I'm so behind on Marvel.
I know. I think we should watch the first episode and we do a reaction episode afterwards, and maybe we could get what's the name of the what's his face's podcast? Fargo
Sharpie?
on Fargo. Yeah.
Sharpie. Yep.
Is it Fargo
Bill
on
Lemke?
Fargo?
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that, where they break down episodes of the movie or the show Fargo. I actually think the show is better than the movie, but you need to watch the movie to get some of these connections into what's going on. That first season, Colin Hanks, Billy Bob Thornton, what's the name of the guy that everyone likes, but now I can't remember his name, and he was in, hold on one second. Like, trust me, when I say his name, you're going to go like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, that one guy that everyone likes.
Yeah, you know, like everyone's all like,
Eddie Murphy.
That guy's nice. Well, I mean, everyone does love Eddie Murphy. Come on. Oliver Platt.
Oh, yeah, I love Oliver Platt.
Everyone likes Oliver Platt. Okay, well, now I got an idea for like an episode coming up. I can't wait. It's going to be so much fun. That's going to wrap it up for today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to help us continue to produce new episodes each week, visit jjmeetsworld.com, where you can donate to our Patreon, pick up some swag at the merch shop, or follow our link to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the sites the cool kids are using these days. JJ Meets World is produced every week by Tucker Lucas. You can find out more about Tucker's work by visiting moonbasemaria.com. If you want to get in touch with your host with the most, check out linebenders.com, where you can find direct contact info for JJ or booking information. The one thing that I didn't like about the Holdovers is everyone was smoking all the time, but no one had one of those really long cigarette holders. Those are classy.